Hello learners, welcome to the online session of FEG2. Today we are going to do Writing Summaries Part 1. What is a summary? A summary is a brief statement or account of the main points of something. It is the process of separating the essential ideas from the non-essential ones in a passage. It is the process of observing how the ideas in a passage are linked to each other. When we get a passage to shorten, the main question which arises is, why do we need to shorten that passage? What is the purpose of shortening that passage? What are the objectives of writing a summary of that passage? So we see that there are certain objectives of writing a summary. Number one, separating essential ideas from the non-essential ones. Second, separating details from ideas. So when you read a passage, many a time you will find that there is some idea in the passage, and with that details are attached to it. So in many cases you will feel that they are not required. So in that case we separate the details from the ideas. The third one is removing repetition or restatement. So in a passage, many a time you will find that certain words are repeated, or certain statements, certain sentences, or certain phrases are repeated. So while shortening the passage, while writing the summary, we can remove these repetitions or restatements. The fourth objective is making use of grammatical features to determine the importance of ideas being presented. For example, nouns, verbs, prepositions, etc. The fifth would be giving importance to the words which link sentences and ideas. And the sixth one, becoming aware of how ideas in a passage are systematically linked to each other. Then comes, how do we write summaries? What are the techniques of writing a summary? So when we get a passage to summarize, the first step is reading the passage. You should read the passage carefully. The second step is read the passage a second time, sentence by sentence, carefully. The third point is you need to identify the words which you think can be removed from the sentence without destroying the meaning of the passage. The fourth, think of reasons for including certain words before proceeding with the next sentence in the same way. Fifth, put together the new sentences that have been created by means of deletion and inclusion of words in the paragraph form. So these will form a summary of the passage. So we see that the main techniques, or if we talk about techniques of writing a summary, we find that main steps are deletion and inclusion of words, phrases, or sentences. Now let us take an example. So here we are taking the example of the passage, the Nile. So it reads as, the great river Nile flows gently in its course through the hot plains in the first half of the year, but later on when the melting snows and the rains on the mountains far to the south swell its tributaries, the Nile overflows. It spreads rich, muddy soil from Ethiopia over its valley and forms deep stretches of green, fertile lands along its banks. The settlers found that in that soft, rich earth, barley and wheat and other crops could be planted even without the use of plough, and they began to make many settlements of farmers. They used stone implements for tilling the soil and flint for their weapons. As time passed, they learned the use of copper. So, we'll read this passage once again. Okay? And then comes the first sentence. How many sentences are there in this passage? There are 4 sentences, right? So we have to do all these 4 sentences separately. We have to look at them. So we'll start with the first sentence or the opening sentence. The first sentence reads, "The great river Nile flows gently in its course through the hot plains in the first half of the year, but later on, when the melting snows and the rains on the mountains far to the south swell its tributaries, the Nile overflows." Here we will find that the phrase has been underlined and the clause has been put in brackets. Okay, so first we'll come to the clause. What is the clause over here? It is when the melting snows and the rains on the mountains far to the south swell its tributaries. So we'll see that the clause has been removed because number 1, it is a subordinate clause, and number 2, because it is a less important part of the statement as it only gives further information relating to the words later on. And it is very important to learn to separate main clause from its subordinate clause in order to understand where the basic meaning of the sentence lies and where the details. Now come to the phrase which is underlined. And what is that? Through the hot plains. So the phrase through the hot plains is a contrast to the melting snows. The line having this phrase has already been found to be a detail and has been removed. So we can remove the phrase through the hot plains. So after deleting or removing the phrase and the subordinate clause from the first line, we get the new sentence, and that is, "The great river Nile flows gently in its course in the first half of the year, but later on the Nile overflows." Now come to the second sentence. "It spreads rich muddy soil from Ethiopia over its valley and forms deep stretches of green fertile lands along its bank." This sentence describes the action of the river. We can delete the underlined words because they relate to the sub-ideas and not the main idea of the sentence. If we delete the word rich or fertile from the sentence, the meaning will be lost. We can remove muddy from Ethiopia, deep and stretches of green because these words relate to the sub-ideas of the sentence. The richness of the soil and the fact that this makes the ground fertile is seen as the main function of the river. Now, after removing these words, we have the new sentence which reads, "It spreads rich soil over its valley and forms fertile lands along its banks. Now come to the third sentence. The third sentence is, the settlers found that in the soft, rich earth, barley and wheat and other crops could be planted even without the use of the plough, and they began to make many settlements of farmers. Here we find that not only the richness but also softness of the soil is important because of the statement that crops can be planted without the use of plows. So, soft and rich cannot be removed. Then the phrase even without the use of the plough is required because it indicates an amazing softness of soil, something that normal fertile soil doesn't possess. So it needs to be retained too. Now the words barley and wheat. Barley and wheat are examples of crops, so they can be removed. It is possible to condense this part of the sentence to a number of crops that could be planted. Moreover, a similarity between the words settlers and settlements of farmers can be noticed here. We can cut down some of the common words and rewrite the sentence in a shortened form. The condensed new sentence that we get now is, many settlements of farmers were formed there because of the soft, rich earth on which a number of crops could be planted even without the use of the plough. Then the last line that we have, the fourth one, is they used stone implements for tilling the soil and flint for their weapons, and as time passed, they learned the use of copper. It is difficult to select the words which can be removed from the sentence. It is not always possible to do so. In this case, the length of the sentence can be reduced by writing a generalization to cover the examples listed here. The examples are making stone implements for tilling the soil, using flint for their weapons, and using copper. Tool making can cover the making of tools and weapons. The kind of materials, stone, flint and copper used over here is historically so important that it seems desirable to retain them. So, after making these changes, we have the new condensed sentence which reads, they learned the art of tool making with the use of stone, flint and copper. Now, after joining these four sentences, the new sentences that we have changed, or the sentences, the four sentences that we have altered, or the deletions and inclusions that we have done in the four sentences, we get the summary of the passage. And the summary thus reads as, the great river Nile flows gently in its course in the first half of the year, but later on it overflows. It spreads rich soil over its valley and forms fertile lands along its banks. Many settlements of farmers were formed there because of the soft, rich earth on which a number of crops could be planted even without the use of the plough. They learned the art of tool making with the use of stone, flint, and copper. Now, you can compare this summary with the original passage. So, you will find that all the main ideas which were there in the passage are retained over here. We have retained all the essential ideas which were there in the passage, the Nile. The details that had been attached with the ideas have been removed. You will also find that the words or phrases or sentences which were coming again and again, which were being repeated, have been deleted. Besides, you will find that certain words relating to the main ideas are included. You will also find that certain sentences have been condensed. So, we see that all the essential points of the original passage have been retained in the summary. Now, coming to the keywords of the process of summarizing. The first word that we had was condense. Condense means express in fewer words. When we express a long sentence in fewer words, it is known as condensation of the sentence. The second term that we find over here is noun. Noun is a part of speech. It is a naming word. Noun names anything under the sun. For example, Mary is a name of a girl, Delhi, name of a place, house, name of a thing, love, name of feeling, golf, name of a game. So, noun is a word, it is a part of speech which names person, place, thing, feelings, emotions, etc. Basically, it names anything under the sun. The next term that comes is verb. A verb is a word which tells us about the state, possession, and action of the noun. For example, is, has, plays. When we say Mary is a doctor, is over here is a verb. It tells us about the state of Mary. That Mary is a doctor. She is not a teacher, not an engineer, but she is a doctor. The second verb that we have over here is has. It shows possession. For example, John has a pen. Mary has a doll. So, has shows the possession that Mary possesses a doll. The third verb that we have taken over here is plays. It shows action. Children play. The term play, the verb play, shows us the action that children are performing. The fourth term that we have over here is subject, and the fifth term that we have over here is predicate. Subject and predicate are the two parts of a sentence. Subject is that part of the sentence about which we say something, and predicate is that part of the sentence which says something about the subject. For example, when we say Jonal is a doctor. So here we are talking about Jonal. We are saying something about Jonal. So journal is subject over here. The second part is a doctor. So we are saying that journal is a doctor. This part is called a predicate because it is saying something about the subject journal. Is a doctor is saying that journal is a doctor. The next term that we have is clause. It is a group of words which includes a subject and a predicate. A clause can be divided into two categories: main clause and subordinate clause. Main clause is also called a principal clause. It is a complete and independent group of words having a subject and a predicate. Subordinate clause is a group of words which includes a subject and a predicate, but it is dependent on the main clause. For example, if we say, if you win the award, I will buy you a new bicycle. So this is our example. If you win the award, I will buy you a new bicycle. You can divide this whole sentence into two. The first part is if you win the award, and the second part is I will buy you a new bicycle. So, if you want to put a full stop after if you win the award, you cannot. Why? Because it is incomplete. If you win the award, what? It is not complete. But if you want to put a full stop after I will buy you a new bicycle, you can. You know, the sentence is complete. I will buy you a new bicycle. If we look at it through the concept of subject and predicate, we will find that I will buy you a new bicycle has both subject and predicate in it. I is subject and will buy you a new bicycle is a predicate, and we are getting a complete meaning also from this group of words. So it can be said to be a complete sentence and we can put a full stop after it. But when we take the other part of the sentence, that is, if you win the award, here also we will find that we have both subject as well as the predicate. If you is subject, win the award is predicate. But because it is dependent upon the main clause, that is, I will buy you a new bicycle, we cannot put a full stop after award if we are writing it separately. Moreover, it has subordinating conjunction in the beginning, that is if, so we cannot put a full stop after it. So here in this example, we say that I will buy you a new bicycle because it is a complete sentence. It is the main clause, and the part which says if you win the award is incomplete because it depends upon the main clause. It is known as subordinate clause. Okay, the next term that we have is phrase. A phrase is a group of words which gives incomplete meaning. For example, on the top, in the corner, under the table. When we say on the top, we know something is there on the top, but what, that we do not know. When we say in the corner, we know something is there in the corner, but what, that we do not know. When we say under the table, we know something is there under the table, but what, that we do not know. So, phrase is a group of words which gives us only incomplete meaning. The next term that we have is summary. Summary means a brief account. And then we have the word systematically, which means methodically. So this was about summarizing the terms that are used during the process of summarizing. Now let us sum up what all we learned today. So basically we learned to shorten the passage into a summary. And what all we do while shortening the passage? We learned to separate the essential ideas from the non-essential ones in a passage. We also learned to observe how the ideas in a passage are systematically linked to each other. We learned to separate details from ideas. We also learned to remove repetition or restatement. And then we learned to give importance to the words which link sentences and ideas. So this was all about writing summaries. Thank you.